The monastery of Assisi lay under a moon of pale silver, silent as a tomb beneath the late autumn sky. Most of the brothers were asleep, their breaths steady, their minds free from the weight of the world. But Francis could not rest. A strange uneasiness pressed against his heart, like a cold wind whose source could not be found. He sat up in his small wooden bed listening. Only the rustle of olive trees outside and the distant howl of the Umbrian wind broke the stillness. Then, suddenly, he heard it, a cry, thin, sharp, wounded, not the familiar call of an owl nor the soft coo of a dove. It carried sorrow in it, almost human, almost pleading. Francis slipped out of his cell and walked barefoot along the stone corridor. His steps echoed softly, as though even the floor feared to disturb the night. He reached the narrow window at the end of the hallway. The moonlight spilled across his face, cold and pale. And there, perched on the outer ledge, was a bird. Black, glossy. Its feathers shimmered like obsidian wet with tears. Its wings hung low, as if burdened by something far heavier than flight. Francis felt his breath tighten. He had spoken with many animals in his life, but never before had he sensed such unbearable grief from a creature.
The bird stared at him, no, into him, with two dark eyes that reflected the night as though they held every shadow in the world. Francis felt as if he were falling through those eyes into depths he could not name. "My brother," Francis whispered, gently, "who has harmed you?" At first, nothing happened. Silence lay thick as mist between them. Then the bird's beak opened, not in a caw, not in a cry, but in a voice that seemed woven from human sorrow and distant thunder. "Francis." Francis froze. The sound seemed to come not only from the bird, but from the darkness around it, from the very night itself. "Francis," it repeated, "the earth groans. The years ahead tremble. You must listen." Francis pressed his trembling hand against his chest. "Lord, what is this that I see?" The bird lifted its wing, revealing feathers edged with an eerie, pale light, like the glow of dawn trapped in morning. "The world," the voice said, "is wounded, and in the year you cannot yet see, the wound shall bleed." Outside, the wind fell silent, as if heaven itself paused to hear what came next.
Francis sank to his knees upon the cold stones, his hands trembling as though winter itself had entered his bones. He could not make sense of the moment before him. Had God sent an angel shaped like a bird? Or had evil taken a form that imitated creation? His thoughts wrestled inside him like two storms colliding. Slowly, he bowed his head. "Lord, give light to my eyes, that I may understand your will. And if temptation stands before me, cast it away." The bird did not move. It waited, calm, almost sorrowful, as Francis whispered prayer after prayer. Only when Francis lifted his gaze again did the bird speak. "The world shall tremble in the year that is to come," it said, the words rolling like distant thunder, yet fragile as a dying breath. "A year unseen by you, a year far beyond your time, the year called 2026. Francis frowned faintly, for the numbers were strange to his ears, like a language he was never meant to speak. Time to him was the present moment, each breath a gift of God. Yet the future suddenly felt close enough to touch, like a storm rumbling beneath the hills. "What do you mean?" Francis asked.
How can I warn those who will live centuries after I return to dust?" The bird lowered his head. "Creation suffers," it murmured. "Every sea and every forest cries beneath the weight of human sin. The trees choke on poisoned winds, and the waters drown in sorrows carved by mankind's pride." Francis's eyes filled with tears. All his life he had sought harmony with God's creation, believing that every creature, no matter how small, sang a silent hymn to the Creator. Yet here stood a messenger declaring that that hymn was turning into a lament. "Why must this happen?" Francis whispered.
"Because the earth has been wounded," the bird replied, "and wounds left unattended must one day bleed. Nature will rise, not in vengeance, but in the justice permitted by the Almighty. Storm shall speak, sea shall roar, fire shall claim what has been scorched already by sin." The words struck Francis like arrows of ice. He felt himself trembling, not out of fear for himself, but fear for souls yet unborn, for lands he would never walk, for children who would inherit a world crumbling under hidden sorrows. "What can be done?" he asked desperately. The bird's wings quivered as if weighed down by grief. "Repentance," it said softly. "Conversion of heart. Love that returns to its Creator." Francis closed his eyes, letting the silence of God settle upon him. He remembered the gospel. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." But what earth would remain for them? When he opened his eyes again, the bird's gaze seemed older than the night, older than creation itself. "Prepare your heart, Francis," it whispered, "for what I shall show you next will break even the mountains." The wind outside began to howl like a wounded creature, though not a leaf stirred upon the olive branches. A chill spread through the hall, and Francis felt the air thicken as if the night itself held its breath. The bird lifted one wing, and darkness stretched outward, not like shadow, but like a curtain being pulled open. Suddenly, Francis was no longer standing in the monastery corridor. He found himself upon a jagged cliff overlooking an endless ocean. The waves churned violently, black like ink mixed with thunder. The air tasted of salt and dread. "What is this place?" Francis whispered. "A future not yet written," the bird answered. "A time when the waters will arise against the pride of men." Before Francis's eyes, the sea began to swell, higher, heavier, as though the ocean floor itself rose to breathe. Storm clouds spun into monstrous spirals, gathering strength like beasts preparing to strike. Lightning tore open the heavens, revealing cities built along shining coasts, cities Francis did not know, made of glass and iron, standing proudly against the sea. In a heartbeat, the waters rose. Towers disappeared beneath waves that crashed like falling mountains. Streets filled faster than wind could carry warning. Ships were tossed like leaves in a burning wind. Entire coastlines vanished beneath roaring floods. Francis covered his ears, but the screams of distant voices pierced through the storm. The despair of millions calling out, the terror of souls unprepared for such fury. "Why does God allow this?" Francis cried. "Creation has limits," the bird answered, "and mankind has forgotten them. They build upon the very edge of destruction and marvel at their own brilliance, forgetting who set the boundaries of the sea." Francis watched in horror as a hurricane larger than kingdoms spiraled into existence, Its eye burned with an eerie, sickly light, like the gaze of something that had waited too long to be unleashed. "Many shall ask where God is," the bird said, "but they have forgotten the covenant placed in the beginning. When creation is wounded, all creation mourns, and the seas shall mourn first." Francis fell to his knees as the vision trembled like shattered glass. When the storm finally dissolved into darkness, he found himself back in the corridor of Assisi, gasping for breath, his heart pounding as if he had drowned with the cities he had seen. The bird's eyes glimmered. That was only the first seal. A heavy silence spread after the sea vision faded, as if even the darkness feared what might come next. Francis clutched the coarse fabric of his habit, breathing hard. The bird lowered its wings, and its voice deepened like a tolling bell. "The first seal is of waters," it said, "but the second is of breath itself." Before Francis could speak, his sight blurred again. The stones beneath him dissolved like smoke, and a cold wind swept across his skin. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing upon a high mountain overlooking a vast and crowded land. The rooftops were packed tightly, stretching far beyond the horizon. Cities the saint could not name, glowing with unnatural lights beneath dense, polluted skies. "This is the East," the bird murmured, appearing beside him, no longer on a window, but hovering in the air like a living shadow. "It is here the illness shall rise." "What illness?" Francis asked, dread stirring within him. The bird hesitated, as though searching for a name that did not yet exist. "I know not its shape, nor its origin. Virus, plague, mutation, or something that is not of the old words. It will move without footsteps. It will strike without sword."
Francis watched crowds moving below, men and women walking hurriedly, unaware of the fate destined to sweep over them. Then one figure stumbled, then another. Francis saw faces pale, breath shortened, a terrible silence filling lungs where air should have lived. "It steals breath?" Francis whispered. "It consumes what gives life," the bird answered, "and no wall of men shall stop its hunger." Francis's heart broke. He remembered the lepers he had embraced, the sick he had comforted, believing disease reminded humanity of humility and compassion. But this affliction felt different. It carried no lesson, only a shadow. "Is it punishment?" he asked. "No," the bird said sorrowfully. "It is consequence. When humanity wounds creation, creation's balance trembles. Air poisoned, beasts driven from their places, hidden sickness awakened from ancient sleep. All things the world has buried shall rise again." Francis trembled, watching the illness leap across nations like invisible fire. Planes landing, crowds scattering, panic spreading. Hospitals overflowed, borders closed. People spoke the name COVID in frightened memory, believing they had learned enough. But this was stronger, faster. A plague without a face. "Will they defeat it?" Francis pleaded. "Many shall try," the bird replied, "but pride blinds the heart of mankind. They trust in wealth more than wisdom, in fear more than faith. Their greatest danger shall not be the illness, but themselves." Francis bowed his head, tears falling onto the barren mountain top. He prayed, "Lord, have mercy upon them, for they know not what shadow approaches." When he looked up again, the cities faded, swallowed by mist. Only the bird remained, its black feathers trembling in an unseen wind. The second seal is breath, and soon the world shall gasp.
A dull thunder rolled across Francis's mind, and again darkness folded itself into vision. This time he stood above a great globe suspended in the void, as if God held the earth between his fingers. At first the world glimmered with the colors of nations, borders outlined in calm lines. But then those borders pulsed, cracked, and bled into crimson. "The third seal," the bird said, voice low, "is the shattering of nations." Bright capitals flickered into chaos. Populations rose against their rulers. Armies moved across lands like shadows scraping the earth. Francis saw great powers facing one another with iron pride, east against west, north against south, each claiming justice, each hiding hunger for dominance. "Why do they war?" Francis asked, aching with sorrow. "For what has always driven kings," the bird replied. "Resources, fear, pride. When seas rise and illness spreads, nations grasp for what remains, water, land, energy, and pride shall be their undoing." Francis watched cities burn, not by nature's fury, but by human hands. Governments crumbled as trust dissolved like sand in storm. The cries of the poor echoed through scorched streets. The powerful hid behind walls that soon collapsed under their own weight. Then Francis saw maps, globes, screens filled with news and angry voices. Each side blamed the other. Peace was spoken only as a weapon of propaganda. "Will they not remember God?" Francis whispered. "They will remember fear more quickly," the bird answered sorrowfully, "and fear gives birth to violence." The vision reddened until Francis felt as if the earth were drowning in bloodshed, not water. Then everything fell silent, as if the world itself paused between breaths, waiting for something worse. "The third seal is division, and the nations shall tremble."
A sudden brilliance burst across the darkness of Francis's vision, so fierce that he shielded his eyes with his sleeve. He felt heat, though no flame touched him, and the world around him shimmered like metal pulled from a forge. When the light dimmed, he found himself standing beneath a vast sky, black as endless night, yet pierced by a single star, brighter than all others. It blazed with a fiery tail, streaking across the heavens like a sword drawn by an invisible hand. "The fourth seal," the bird's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere, "is a sign in the sky." Francis watched as the star seemed to fall, tumbling across space with terrible, awe-striking beauty. Cities in the world below lifted their eyes. Crowds filled streets and rooftops, pointing to the heavens with fear-stricken faces. News spread faster than wind. Screens, radios, voices shouting one word again and again. Comet, impact, prophecy, doom. Some believed it heralded the end of days. Others laughed, forcing courage into trembling hearts. Scientists spoke with certainty one hour and uncertainty the next. The world held its breath as numbers changed, predictions shifted, and panic grew.
"It shall not be the end," the bird said with solemn weight, "but many will believe they see the beginning of the end." Francis watched entire nations fall into confusion. Markets crashed. Crowds hoarded food as though winter eternal approached. Families fled cities, seeking refuge in mountains or deserts. Churches overflowed with souls begging forgiveness for sins they had forgotten until fear dragged memory back. Then Francis saw something stranger still. The star split into fragments, brilliant shards scattering across the sky. Radiant arcs blazed through the atmosphere, turning night into ghostly daylight. People screamed as though judgment itself had descended. But the fragments burned up harmlessly in the upper air, leaving nothing behind but trembling hearts and exhausted terror. Francis turned to the bird, breathless. "Why show me fear without destruction?" "Because fear reveals the truth of souls. Some repent only when fire touches their sky. Others curse God for a danger that never came." Francis gazed upward, watching the heavens cool, the stars settle into quiet again. Yet the world below would never be the same. Trust had cracked, dread had taken root. "The fourth seal," the voice whispered, "is panic born of the heavens, a star that falls, though the true fall has not yet begun." Flames bloomed across Francis's vision like red flowers opening in the dark. Heat shimmered through the air, and suddenly he stood within a forest, its once green canopy now choked by pillars of smoke. Leaves curled into ash, trees crackled like bones breaking under an unseen hand. Foxes fled through undergrowth that no longer sheltered them. Birds scattered, wings frantic, feathers scorched by embers that fell like burning snow. Deer ran in terrified herds, eyes wide with the ancient fear of death, yet nowhere to run. Every direction glowed like the mouth of a furnace. Francis reached out helplessly, his fingers grasping smoke. "What have they done?" he cried. The bird hovered beside him, its black feathers untouched by flame, as if sorrow itself shielded it from destruction. "They flee," it said quietly, "from the burning of their home, a fire not born of nature alone, but of negligence and greed." Francis saw trucks, machines, endless lines of fire cutting through forests so vast the sky above turned red for days. He saw jungles once teeming with life now turned to barren charcoal plains.
And worst of all, he saw silence. "Where are the creatures now?" he asked, voice trembling. The bird lowered its head. "Gone. Many forever. Species that praised God with silent beauty, vanished before the world even learned their names." Then Francis heard it, faint at first, like wind moaning through hollow branches, a cry, not human, not wholly animal, a sound woven from every creature that had ever drawn breath upon the earth. It grew and grew until it shook the trees and shook Francis's heart, a lamentation older than mankind, rising from fur and feather, from wing and hoof. "They cry for mercy," the bird whispered, "but humanity does not listen." Francis felt his knees weaken. He saw oceans emptied of whales, skies barren of birds, plains where wild herds once thundered, now eerily still. He saw a world growing quiet, too quiet. "A silent earth," Francis murmured, horrified. "Creation without creature, praise without voice." The bird turned to him, eyes gleaming with unbearable sorrow. "Man believes himself Lord of creation, yet forgets that creation is a choir. When one voice falls silent, the song grows dim, and now the choir fades. Francis covered his face, sobbing. He had spoken to animals all his life, calling them brothers and sisters. Now he watched his brothers flee into extinction. The seventh cry is not against men, it is for help, but mankind does not hear.
The flames withdrew, leaving Francis surrounded by darkness once more. No forest, no sea, only a vast empty space like the moment before creation's first breath. In that stillness, Francis felt something he had not felt in years: abandonment. He clasped his rosary, whispering prayers that usually burned bright in his heart, but tonight they felt cold, like stones in his mouth. No warmth, no voice, no whisper of grace. "Lord," Francis murmured, "why have you grown silent?" Then the world around him shifted. He found himself standing inside a church, not his own humble chapel in Assisi, but a magnificent cathedral, larger and more splendid than any building he had ever known. Crowds filled his pews, but their faces were troubled. Voices rose not in unified prayer, but in arguments that echoed through vaulted ceilings. Priests debated, bishops quarreled. Even humble believers turned against one another, each convinced they alone held truth. The altar seemed distant, almost hidden behind a veil of human noise. "Why do they divide so?" Francis asked. The bird appeared at the edge of the sanctuary, its black feathers stark against the white stone. It answered, "Because fear divides faster than faith." Francis watched accusations fly like arrows. Doctrines clashed, traditions fractured, and hearts that once knelt together now stood opposed. He saw believers leaving churches not out of rebellion, but out of confusion, their souls starved for certainty. "Where is God in this?" Francis whispered in anguish. The bird's voice softened, nearly tender. "God is present in the silence." "But silence feels like abandonment," Francis said, aching. "No," the bird replied gently. "This silence is a test, not absence." The cathedral darkened, candles flickering out one by one until only a dim glow remained above the tabernacle. Francis felt the weight of sorrow settle upon him, yet beneath it, a faint hint of hope, like the smallest flame refusing to die. "The eighth seal is not disaster of earth or sky, but trial of the soul. For even faith must walk through darkness to know the light again." For several nights after the vision of the burning forests, Francis dreamed restlessly. He awoke before dawn and walked toward the sea near Assisi, needing silence. But that morning, the waves were not the deep blue he knew. They shimmered strangely, dark, cloudy, and then as the sun rose, the water turned the color of blood. Fishermen on the shore screamed, boats rushed back toward land. Dead fish floated to the surface, hundreds of them, bodies pale, eyes empty. Children began to cry, while older men crossed themselves, whispering that the end had come. "It is judgment!" one woman shouted. "God punishes us!" Francis felt his heart tighten, but he did not believe God worked through terror. He knelt by the shore, dipping his hand into the red water. The seas smelled of chemicals, bitter and metallic. In a flash, he saw a vision, factories far away pouring poison into rivers, careless hands dumping waste into oceans. The voice returned. Creation is wounded by human greed, and the sea bleeds for it. Francis whispered a prayer, tears burning his eyes. Lord, teach us to love the sea as a gift, not exploit it as a resource. Behind him, the waves rolled crimson. Francis walked back into the forest, still shaken by the Red Sea. He longed for a sign of hope, something gentle. As he prayed beneath an old oak tree, a small brown bird fluttered down to his shoulder, chirping softly as if greeting an old friend. He smiled and lifted his hand for it to perch. "Brother," he whispered, "you remind me that life continues." But suddenly, the bird trembled. Its tiny body convulsed, wings stiffening. Then, without warning, it collapsed in his palm, motionless. Francis gasped. "No, not again," he murmured, thinking the visions had turned into physical realities. He knelt, cradling the creature the same way he once held injured animals in his youth. "Lord, have mercy," he prayed, believing his heavenly warnings had now ended in death. Yet, in the stillness, something miraculous happened. The feathers began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, until the entire body dissolved into pure white light. The light rose like a small flame, drifting upward into the branches above. Francis felt warm tears on his cheeks. A voice, softer than before, whispered in his heart, "Nothing I created dies forever." In that moment, Francis understood. Death, too, was only a doorway to divine renewal.
Francis knelt on the cold ground, the sky still dark from the final vision. His heart felt heavy with all he had witnessed: war between nations, creation wounded, the silence of the church, and the fading of all living things. Yet he lifted his hands and prayed, not for himself, but for the whole world that seemed to tremble beneath judgment. "Lord," he whispered, "have mercy on those who have forgotten you. Teach us again to love what you made." Slowly, the darkness around him began to soften. Dawn crept across the horizon, painting pale gold over the ashes of night. The visions faded like mist, and Francis found himself once again in the quiet fields of his homeland. For a moment, there was only silence. He feared the world had truly fallen. Then, from a nearby branch, came the soft, familiar song of a morning bird. Its simple melody filled the air like a blessing. Francis closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Perhaps humanity would listen. Perhaps mercy would still overcome destruction. In the gentle sunlight, he realized what the visions were telling him. Hope remains even in ashes if mankind chooses to return to God.